Alright, hello, citizens of the Nigelverse. It's Nigel once again, and welcome back to the Monday Night Wars. So, the bad news is that my fan has stopped working, so I may or may not burn up here. But the good news is we've got another installment of the Monday Night Wars, and this week, because we are very far behind. This week will be the next three episodes of the Monday Night Wars. But if you missed the first installment, I recommend going back and checking that out. But just to give you a brief recap, some of the things that's going on between WWE and WCW up to this point in time. We looked at both 1995 and 1996 in terms of ratings and storylines. So around this time, NWO has formed. They are starting to run a roughshod over WCW, and WCW is beating Raw in the ratings, and we are firmly within the 83-week time period where Nitro dominated Raw in the ratings. But what happens when Raw and the WF as a whole finally shed off the last of the new generation and cocoon and emerge the Attitude Era Butterfly? Hey, let's find out. We have, of course, the ratings from 1997, and unlike what we did last time, 1997, because it was a full calendar year. Here we're looking at the ratings. We got our averages. I'm not gonna go. I'm not gonna go week by week and talk about each rating. Just kind of talk about a lot of the trends and but also, we have our storylines and some of our MVPs. Is who was really making an impact around both WF and WCW at this time. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, Oh, first getting into our ratings here, and I'm gonna kind of go through. Like I said, I'm not gonna go week by week and talk about the rating. But I'll show you guys here so you can try your best to follow along. But what you're gonna see is that we are in the 83-week period, meaning Raw does not beat Nitro a single week in the ratings. And and what we can see here, as you can see, pointing by my mouse, starting with the first episode, that being on January 6th of 1997, and we see that Nitro does fluctuate, and they do go up and down. So you start with a 3 and then go 3.4, 3.7, and you can see even here around the February 17th episode where they dip down to a 2.9, but then come right back up. There are, just like last time, there are a couple weeks that go uncontested. Go uncontested, such as this week, where I imagine either Nitro didn't air that week, or it was insufficient data. That being obviously the July 21st episode, which technically would have been yesterday. But and also how appropriate having the Monday Night Wars on a Monday, and we're gonna conclude next week on a Monday, of course. But we see WCW, and they go all the way up to a 4.4 and even a 4.8 here. So WCW, who for the most part doing solid enough number, he's got 4.6, 4.3. And they end off the year on December 29th, which is one of my friend's birthdays actually, but they end off with a 4.6, giving Nitro an average of about 3.7 for the year, or at least based on my calculation, which you can see by the formula here. It's the same for Raw. As for Nitro, that being just taking the average, and it's obviously minus the NA here. Which, speaking of which, let's see how Raw is doing. So Raw, very far behind. We do see some rises, but also some falls, including dipping down to 1.9 here on the March 3rd episode. We see them climb back up, and you see the week that went uncontested Raw actually did 4.1, which is pretty solid. There were a couple other weeks that went uncontested, both the August 25th and September 1st episodes. Was a Raw. and you see some threes, you see some 3.4, you see even a 3.6. So Raw ends off with a 3.6, giving them a yearly average of 2.6, which is a very, very big difference between Raw and Nitro at this point in terms of the ratings and their kind of overall score. As we're going to get into in the storylines, Raw is undergoing a change, and Raw does need to do something, and they need to do something quick because they are falling very far behind when it comes to WCW. Who and this is around the time where Raw and the WF ultimately end up finding their attitude. And in terms of notable moments and storylines in WF, you can see one of them is the beginning of the Attitude Era. Yes, as the Attitude Era kind of somewhat officially began, and people have debated where the Attitude Era began. Some say it began with the Montreal Screwjob, which we'll get to. Some say it began with Austin, everything he was doing. Some would say it even began and with Brian Pillman, the loose cannon, and I don't quite have Brian Pillman here, and I definitely should have. But Brian Pillman, of course, jumping ship from WCW over to first ECW and the WF, and the story of how Brian Pillman jumped ship from WCW over to ECW and tooled the loose cannon gimmick even more is a fascinating one, and so. Ian Pillman essentially convinced Eric Bischoff in storyline to kind of trade him over. And I know I'm kind of paraphrasing some of the story here, but essentially, the gist of it, at least if I'm remembering it correctly, is Brian Pillman convincing Eric Bischoff to trade him over to ECW as part of storyline, but Brian Pillman ends up swerving, and he drives and swerves over Eric Bischoff and joins ECW for reals. I guess as I was gonna make a joke about that, but it'll kind of spoil later on. But anyway, so Brian Pillman's character of the loose cannon, admittedly, was definitely a bit of a trailblazer when it comes to the Attitude Era. Even though he ultimately wasn't in WWE long, as he ended up passing away in 1997, and Ian Pillman definitely seeing some of the things, and this is right before the Attitude Era began, and like officially in WWE slash WF, which does suck, but at a lot of the beginnings of some of the things that would be commonplace in the Attitude Era, more specifically blurring the lines between kayfabe and reality to the point where even the fellow wrestlers didn't quite know when things were work or a shoot, versus such as when Brian Pillman grabbed Tony Schiavone for real in WCW. So Brian Pillman blurring those lines, and in the Attitude Era definitely blurred those lines as well. Vince McMahon even cut a promo, kind of beginning the Attitude Era, talking to the audience, kind of like lifting the curtain. So it kind of makes that the whole curtain call incident seem kind of hypocritical, which I did hit the previous episode, not this episode, System Shock Radio, that came out yesterday, but the one before. I talked about the curtain call / Madison Square Garden incident. So if you haven't already, go check that out. But Miss Man talking about how the people are tired of having their intelligence insulted, and pretty much announcing the Attitude Era. So the Attitude Era coming into full swing, essentially, or at least the beginnings of it. It would definitely take more shape as the year goes on, especially in 1998. But what else was going on in the WF around this time? We of course have the Montreal Screwjob. Now, the Montreal Screwjob, I'm sure even if you're a non-wrestling fan, you've probably heard of it. I've even talked about it on this channel. I reviewed the match, that being Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series 1997. If you haven't already, go check out that review. But essentially, to give you the cliff notes, Bret Hart was locked in the sharpshooter by Shawn Michaels, and infamously Vince McMahon called for the bell, and Bret Hart got a little bit upset at it, and Bret Hart essentially screwed out of the WWF Championship. If he was going, originally the plan was he was going to drop the W Championship because he was W Champion at the time, and obviously now it went to Michaels after this match. As Brett was gonna drop the WF Championship the next night, Raw vacated because his contract was coming to an end, and Vince McMahon admitted to Bret Hart that they weren't able to honor his contract, and that and the issues Bret was having, not just with Vince himself, but obviously with Shawn Michaels. Was very legendary rivalry. Him and Shawn Michaels, both on and off camera, very legendary, infamous rivalry. But nevertheless, Bret Hart essentially was on his way to WCW, and so Vince decided this would be the best course of action to take the title off of Bret Hart. Right now, people have gone back and forth as to whether or not this was a good thing or a bad thing. Because on one hand, Vince McMahon essentially screwed over his top talent, and it led to a lot of bitter feelings for years. By Bret Hart, and quite a bit of resentment. Eventually, he and Vince buried the hatchet, and he and Shawn Michaels buried the hatchet as well. But it did lead to a lot of very bitter feelings from the Hitman. And if Goldberg is anything to go by, Bret definitely knows how to hold a grudge, but we're not quite there yet. On the other hand, it is kind of also what really helped jump the Attitude Era. A lot of people feel like this was definitely what began the Attitude Era as well, and it also will help form the Vince McMahon character, or the character that would go on to antagonize Stone Cold Steve Austin and whoever else was beloved by the fans. Vince McMahon became like the evil old corporate leader, or kind of similar to what Eric Bischoff was doing, being the leader of the NWO and everything. And so all of that stems from the Montreal Screwjob. But then, and the other thing that a lot of people feel will help kickstart the Attitude Era was the formation of D-Generation X. Initially Shawn Michaels and Triple H, but eventually they would add more members to the ranks, including the Road Dogg, Jesse James, the Badass Billy Gunn, who actually had formed the New Age Outlaws prior to his Road Dogg started off as kind of like the protege to Jeff Jarrett, and of course that both fit both with the Double J and everything, and Road Dogg even in storyline, and kind of being the voice behind the song With My Baby Tonight, but of course, Jeff Jarrett took credit for it. So Jeff Jarrett essentially pulled the Milli Vanilli, but got rewarded for it instead of punished. At least Jeff Jarrett was smart enough not to let the track skip and check the disc as it was playing. But nevertheless, Billy Gunn was rockabilly and was kind of the protege to the Honky Tonk Man, and so Billy Gunn eventually turned on Honky Tonk Man, and to form up with Road Dogg, they formed the New Age Outlaws. And the rest is history. One of a lot of people's favorite tag teams, of course, they had the legendary intro as well. The Road Dogg, Jesse James, the Badass Billy Gunn. And it's crazy to think Billy Gunn's still actually wrestling, performing to this day. So D-Generation X coming together, but for now, we're in Triple H and Shawn Michaels territory. Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and of course Chyna, who was the real life girlfriend of Triple H at the time, and we'll definitely get to that, of course. But how that kind of unfolded and everything, that's kind of a messy situation, but that's for later on. But D-Generation X essentially running their own roughshod through the WWF, being very sophomores, very much frat boys. He's pushing the Open, being controversial, being very abrasive, getting into it with Commissioner Slaughter and any form of authority. He definitely anti-authority, although they were very much more in the vein of heels. And that also segues into Undertaker versus you see Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels here. They had their feud as well, but then also leading into Undertaker versus Kane, and these two kind of intersected. So it was at Bad Blood 1997, and where the first ever Hell in a Cell match took place. Between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. Essentially, the story being Shawn Michaels constantly ducking The Undertaker. These two had been battling throughout quite a bit of 1997, and stemming from Shawn Michaels accidentally costing The Undertaker the WWF Championship at SummerSlam when he was a special guest referee. Shawn Michaels. Well, the stipulation was that Shawn Michaels had to call it absolutely right down the middle, daddy, or else he would be banned from wrestling in the United States. So he was the special guest referee between the match of Undertaker and Bret Hart, Bret Hart, spit in Shawn Michaels' face. So Shawn responded by trying to thwack Bret Hart with a chair, but instead had caught The Undertaker, so accidentally costing him there. And from there, Bret Hart beat The Undertaker, and the feud between Undertaker and Shawn Michaels really kicked into high gear there. But it's also famously at Bad Blood 1997, not just the debut of the Hell in a Cell, but also the debut of Kane, that being The Undertaker's younger brother. So at this point, Paul Bearer had turned on The Undertaker, and Paul Bearer threatened him to reveal a secret. And the secret was that Undertaker had inadvertently killed his parents in the house fire, his parents and his younger brother, but his younger brother survived. Kane, if you think about it, Kane and Darth Vader almost have the same origin, and if you can believe it. But as Kane showed up for revenge against The Undertaker, at first Undertaker didn't want to fight his younger brother, but eventually his hand was forced. But we'll get to that when we get to that, because that's later on in the timeline. But then we had Goldust, and the artist formerly known as Goldust. The actor was a lot of things. It was successful, it was controversial, and it was pretty weird at times. And Goldust definitely weird and controversial. The artist formerly known as Goldust began and being accompanied by Luna Vachon, which was kind of kind of had like a dominatrix role. Well, think of like Rhea Ripley and Dominic Mysterio. Their kind of relationship affiliation nowadays, but way edgier and way weirder, and with way more of that 90s stuff that definitely didn't age well today. Just very weird time. But we mentioned Undertaker for Shawn Michaels. Then we have the Nation of Domination, and consisting of a number of members, including Farouk, D'Lo Brown, Mark Henry, and The Rock. No, not Rocky Maivia anymore, or Rocky Maivia turned heel, joined the Nation of Domination, became The Rock. Eventually led to a power struggle with The Rock taking over the Nation of Domination, and using that to really help propel them further into superstardom, and they say the rest is history. Rocky is a lot of things, but sucks is not one of them. His words, not mine. And the Nation of Domination would feud with D-Generation X, leading to a very interesting segment that is aged like a nice tall glass of milk on a hot summer's day, and that is where I'll leave it. And next up, worth mentioning is Ken Shamrock, the world's most dangerous man, and making the crossover from MMA into the WWE. He eventually leading to Dan the Beast Severn doing the same thing. Ken Shamrock was the special guest referee at WrestleMania 13 in the submission match between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret Hart. And eventually from there, Ken Shamrock signed with WWE became a part of WWE programming. Found some success there. He was Intercontinental Champion. A lot of people felt like he was definitely ahead of his time, and that if he had debuted like today, now that's that's an MMA WWF relationship is now pretty much a thing with hang under Endeavor and everything, and that he would have a lot more success. But if you think about it, it would he though? Because in a way, Ken Shamrock was kind of a trailblazer. Like if Ken Shamrock hadn't been one of the first to do it, would we have had the crossover from people like Dan Severn or Ronda Rousey or Shayna Baszler or the Four Horsewomen of the MMA, or Matt Riddle, who so Ken Shamrock kind of a trailblazer in that regard. Someone has to be the first, of course, and then of course I mentioned the aforementioned Mr. McMahon. And but what's happening over in WCW? The first thing of note is his Hulk Hogan versus Sting, and really this began back in 1996. I mentioned uh, in the previous episode of the Monday Night Wars where Sting he distanced himself from all his friends because he was accused of being a part of the NWO. But Sting for 18 months sat up in the rafters, looking down upon the NWO. And people anxiously waited for the day where Sting would finally strike and knock Hogan off his perch, and it kind of came they had their match at Starrcade 1997, which I've mentioned before. Starrcade, for WCW, essentially their equivalent of WrestleMania. Hogan and Sting did have their match at 18 months of build, well, the most successful pay per view that WCW ever did, in a lot of part due to this build. The build was phenomenal. 18 months. People didn't think the storyline was possible until the Bloodline storyline came along, and that storylines lasted even longer. But 18 months back then, and building towards the battle between Hogan and Sting. But why did it crash and burn? Well, I had talked about it. Or on the channel around when Cody lost to Roman the first time around, kind of to show you that hey, WWE might have committed a bit of a blunder here, or at least a lot of people felt at the time. But WCW wasn't immune to it either, so if you haven't already, go check out that review. But as for this one, yeah, sadly didn't pan out the way it could have and or should have. I mentioned it before and I've mentioned it again. And unfortunately, Hogan got way too much offense. Which asking Hogan to sell for Sting would be like asking a 2-year-old to do calculus. Probably wasn't gonna happen. But unfortunately, Hogan got way too much offense in, and they messed up the finish. So somebody screwed up, whether it was Nick Patrick, the referee, or somebody getting in his ear, or essentially what was supposed to happen is and again, kind of the cliff notes, because I kind of went into more detail about it in my review there, so go check it out. But essentially, Nick Patrick was allegedly supposed to do a fast count, did a regular count, so Sting looked like he straight up lost, and then Bret Hart reversed the decision. Bret Hart was in WCW at this time, but Bret Hart reversed the decision. Sting and put away Hogan with the Scorpion Deathlock and won the World Championship. But it was a really weird look, and it looked like and Sting kind of looked like the heel here, that he lost fair and square, and had to get help in order to capture the WCW championship. So, definitely a big blunder, and sign that despite the successes, WCW is not infallible. But yeah, but the other things of note that I have is Hulk Hogan versus Roddy Piper, or Hollywood Hogan, I should say. I'll probably interchange between the two. It is Hollywood Hogan versus Roddy Piper, with Piper being brought in to WCW in 1997 to confront and Hogan, and to and to stand up to Hogan, and of course continuing their rivalry from the WWF days back during the Golden Era, during the Hulkamania era, what have you, and and it led to some questionable decision making. It's a questionable booking when it comes to Hogan versus Piper. Or there have been other people who have explained Piper's entire time in WCW who way better than this, but notably they faced off at both Bash at the Beach and Halloween Havoc. And actually, I got the time mixed up. I believe it was Starcade the previous year where Hogan and Piper fought, and then not Bash the Beach, Halloween Havoc '97, where they had the big cage, which led to a very boring match within the cage, and Macho Man pretty much pulling in Adam Copeland, or inversely, I guess, because it happened first. Adam Copeland at Double or Nothing pulling a Macho Man and pretty much like messing up his leg by diving off the top of the cage. It was a mess, but next up, the other things we have of note is the rise of Goldberg. Yes, this was around the time where Goldberg was rising to prominence, and Goldberg is credited for being one of the few homegrown WCW success stories. And he's essentially a one-trick pony with a hell of a trick, and that trick is pretty much annihilating whoever was dumb enough to stand across the ring from him. And Goldberg's presentation was simple but effective. It didn't have a whole lot of flashy colors. Here's he had a cool entrance coming from the back, like with the pyro and everything, ain't nothing really flashy, just absolute dominance. So, racking up a 100, I believe 131 and 0 streak, which would come to an end in 1998, and we'll obviously get to that. But Goldberg essentially being built as this big deal. Asking the question, who's next, and Bill Goldberg, definitely he still continues to be probably one of the biggest success stories for WCW, at least homegrown success stories. He's obviously would stay there like pretty much close till the end of WCW, who eventually made his way to WWF, not WWF, WE. It was WE by the time he made it there, and with so was there, and the rest from there was history. But then next up we have the NWO versus DDP, because the NWO needed something to do while Hogan was and to an extent Savage were off in the main events. And one of the storylines was DDP. DDP one of the stars to really resist the temptation of joining the NWO. Where it seemed like a lot of people were joining the NWO left and right. A few too many, but DDP was the one to resist, really emerging as a fan favorite, the People's Champion, and as he became known as just combating the NWO menace, and never really joining and constantly combating the NWO. But next we have the Flock, of course, Raven, making his way from ECW to WCW, who over a lack of pay, which lack of pay, and ECW go together like peanut butter and jelly. But Haven making his way over to WCW, who kind of turning his playground, having the Flock, another major heel stable. And of course, there's comparing this heel stable, the Flock, to the other major heel stable, that being the NWO. Only one of them can really get the prime limelight, but the Flock still did their thing in the mid card, consisting of members such as Perry Saturn and Billy Kidman, but the Flock running rampant, next up we have Eddie Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio. And we'll get to it, but man, the cruiserweight scene, definitely in WCW, that was another one of their major claims to fame, was the cruiserweight championship title picture, and especially the lucha libre wrestling, being present within WCW, who as well, and Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio is a prime example of that, leading to what a lot of people consider to be one of the best WCW matches is in company history at Halloween Havoc 1997. It's a match that, if you haven't already, definitely recommend checking it out. I reviewed it quite a while ago. I think it was one of like the first wrestling reviews I did. So go check that out. And and if you've seen it already, watch it again because it is that good. But in fact, I'm thinking about watching it again, maybe re-reviewing it. I've been thinking about doing re-reviews, and that's definitely one that would definitely be very high on the list of re-reviews. But the last one we have here is Conan and Conan, who all like the luchadors who were killing WCW brought over. Conan is to thank for quite a few of the kind of being kind of the middleman, kind of the conduit for helping these guys get in WCW, including Rey Mysterio, which is why Rey Mysterio and Conan have such a tight bond. Conan would also eventually join the NWO, and become K-Dog and everything. So there's that as well. As for our MVP, he's in WF. There's quite a few MVPs I had. First being, of course, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and we're not quite as coronation just yet, but he is definitely ascending to the throne. We have Bret Hart, who even though he ended up leaving under the controversial circumstances, still did his thing in his feud with Austin, and which also carried into 1997, including the double turn and everything. In his feud with Austin, in his feud with Undertaker, in his feud with Shawn Michaels. Which, speaking of which, Shawn Michaels and Hunter Hearst Helmsley / Triple H, D-Generation X, both as solo and as a team. Then there's the Undertaker, which the Undertaker at this time, I'm dressing a lot more. Dressing a lot edgier to fit the times of the Attitude Era. So props him for the commitment. Then there's Kane, who bursts onto the scene in the aforementioned Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood 1997. And then there's Mankind, and Mankind, of course, doing, of course, Mick Foley, former Cactus Jack. And I really I should say Mick Foley. Because we did see some of the faces of Foley here, but Mankind rising up as well, including with his feud with The Undertaker and with Shawn Michaels and Triple H, and The Rock. Like I said, no longer Rock Maivia, but The Rock. Now we see a lot of these guys rising to prominence here, but they'll be even bigger figures as we continue through the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars. As for WCW, the few I put down were Sting, especially from a storytelling perspective, helping carry the feud for the 18 months. On Diamond Dallas Page for the aforementioned reasons, combating the NWO, becoming the People's Champion. Goldberg, his rise to prominence, his rise to status. The NWO being the major heel faction, and the Cruiserweight division, because they definitely were killing it, and in some cases even making up for the inequities of the main event scene. But nevertheless, that's going to do it for this episode of the Monday Night Wars. Stay tuned. What we're going to do is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday will be the episodes on the Monday Night Wars. So stay tuned for Wednesday for the next one. Now that WF has found its attitude, can they finally come back in the ratings and bring the fight back to WCW? Stay tuned and find out. And how things unfold now that Sting is WCW champion. Of course, he won it at Starrcade. And how will the Attitude Era evolve from there? Find out how next time in the Monday Night Wars. But nevertheless, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor. Like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload a video so you can see as it drops. And let me know in the comments your thoughts on this episode of the Monday Night War. Or isn't it? Are you excited for the next one and your reaction to everything and going on so far? Stay tuned later on tonight because we're going to have our match to tie in with the Monday Night Wars. At least this episode of the Monday Night Wars. But nevertheless, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace.